This is going to be a very brief overview of how to do a Hong Kong finish. What I've done is I've grabbed this fabric that I was working with in a different part of the tutorial. But if you're going to do the bias tape in Hong Kong finish method, I recommend that you do so before you sew your fabric together. So I'm going to fold that fabric back so it's out of the way, and we're just working with this raw edge here that is on my right. We're going to take our bias tape. I am using double fold bias tape, again, that I made. And with double fold bias tape, you will have your layers of fabric, the raw edges have been pressed over and they meet in the middle. And when you've pressed them over, you will now have crease lines on either side. So a crease line here and a crease line there. And that's great because it also serves as a stitching line or a stitching guide. So you're going to take your bias tape, and the bias tape should be with the wrong side of the fabric whenever you open it up. And you should be looking at the right side of whatever seam that you're going to be enclosing with bias tape. You're going to be placing those layers of fabric right sides together and the raw edge. And you're going to be stitching right in that crease from where you folded your bias tape. And you'll do that the full length of the seam that you're going to be enclosing. And once you've done that, you would then be able to fold the bias tape back closed, and then you're going to fold it over to the back so that you don't have any exposed raw edges. The raw edges from the seam that you're enclosing will be sandwiched in between the layers of your bias tape. And then you would use pins or clips, obviously, but then you would go back and you would sew very close to this folded edge here. So folding this folded edge right here. Use about a 1/8, no more than 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and stitch all the way down the length of that seam. The second way, it ends up with the same result. You just skip that first line of stitching where you have your bias tape opened and stitch in the crease. You would leave it folded, but I would recommend giving your bias tape a press so that the folded edge here, that's going to be on the outside, has a crease in it. And then you would just slip the seam from whatever, the raw edge from whatever seam you're going to be enclosing. Just slip that in between the layers of fabric, but that raw edge right up to the center fold there. And then use pins or clips to hold the 5 layers of fabric together. Go slow. Use as many pins or as clips as you need, because you want to make sure that that raw edge from the seam that you're going to be enclosing does not slip out or shift while you're sewing, because we didn't secure the bias tape to that seam first before folding it over. This is just skipping that first step. So again, use lots of clips, and you're still going to be top stitching 1/8 or no more than 1/4 of an inch from this folded edge here all the way down the length of the seam. And you still end up with the same result, that the raw edge of that seam is going to be enclosed in the bias tape. So that's a brief summary of doing a Hong Kong finish.